Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Thursday night, September 12th, 2024. I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. Cody, our first live Thursday night preview, week one in the books. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Feels different to be back talking to you so quick, but I'm happy to be doing this twice a week format. Uh, More engaging content, and who doesn't love talking NFL?
Oh, exactly. That's why we're here. So if you have not heard or you did not tune in on Monday, we are live on Facebook X. I have to start saying X instead of Twitter. I've been
We are
like
not
way
live on
behind on
X
that.
currently.
Oh, okay. My bad. Facebook and YouTube. So come check us out on Facebook and YouTube on Mondays and Thursdays at 6:30, where you can watch us live, or as Cody corrected me on Monday, you will still be in your podcast feeds the next day. So Tuesday mornings and Friday mornings to give you all the insight we have for the upcoming week. You can always hit us in our DMs with fantasy questions, or if you're watching live, put it in the comments and we will answer your questions as we go on the show. But Cody, I think I hit everything this time. Why don't we just sit back, relax, and chat? That transition is going to get a little bit better with me having to do the new intro. It's a little bit rough right now. So thank you for sticking with me. Also, thank you for sticking with the fact that my camera is a little bit blurry right now. We'll figure that out.
Figure your stuff out, man. You're podcasting like you play fantasy football right now.
Last week, especially, but came back in the 4 o'clock games and the late games for a couple of them. So, I mean, it's going to be a strong finish to the show.
All right. I like it. I like it.
As a reminder, drop any questions you have in the chat, and we would love to hear from you and answer anything you've got. In the meantime, a lot of injuries to talk about for fantasy and otherwise heading into week 2. We're going to talk more about this when we talk about Thursday Night Football after the actives and actives officially come out. But Raheem Mostert for the Miami Dolphins officially out for tonight's game. We'll talk more, like I said, that when we get further. Another injury that we mentioned on our last show, Puka Nacua is officially on injured reserve. We did talk about a couple of receivers who could fill in for that. Any changes on your thoughts there, Cody?
No, I think Demarcus Robinson is the guy. We saw him perform last year when Cooper Kupp went out. He had some, nice finishes. So he's the guy that you would replace. And then obviously with Cooper Kupp there, he had a career high in targets and catches on week 1. I think that'll continue as long as he can stay healthy. But the Rams are going through it. It's not just Puka. That's the big name for fantasy, but they're down multiple offensive linemen. They're getting banged up on the defensive side of the ball too. It's starting to feel like that year. They made the playoffs last year, but I believe it was the year after they lost to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I can't remember off the top of my head, but then they were just devastated with injuries. And it was like, oh, is this team not? And then you think about it, and they were just, and it's starting to feel that way again this season. Long season. Hopefully they can turn it around, but a lot of injuries coming out of LA right now.
Yeah, for week 1, it was absolutely insane to hear how many offensive linemen they were down, everything else. And the fact that they still stayed in with the Lions, they have a chance to be a dangerous team down the stretch if they can get healthy and get it together.
They have an
And still
elite
had a great
quarterback.
game.
The Lions
Exactly.
don't. That's
Ooh.
why they were able to stay in the game.
Shots on Jared Goff already. Matt Stafford. I don't even know. I'm on the fence now on who's better between Matt Stafford and Jared Goff, but that's an argument we'll have throughout the season still.
It's not a question. Matt Stafford is the better quarterback.
Okay. At this point in his career, we'll see. Big injury news that we've been following. Obviously, Monday night, there was no Christian McCaffrey. He is now considered unlikely for week 2, even though he has been a limited participant in practice. A lot of people are freaking out because they heard the news he was dealing with Achilles tendonitis, obviously a serious condition. And when you look at it, a lot of people can miss up to 2 to 3 months, or at least not be up to 100% for 2 to 3 months when dealing with Achilles tendonitis. I don't think this is going to be an issue that really bothers him quite that long, because we're forgetting about the fact that he's been dealing with this since the beginning of training camp. This didn't just happen the week before the season. So he's further along in this injury recovery than we think about.
Yeah, I do think there is some, level of concern, especially if you draft him number 1 overall. Like, he's going to be out for a while, and we saw the 49ers don't, quote unquote, need him to be successful on the ground or a successful football team. So they are not going to rush him back. They need him in December, January, and hopefully February from a 49ers fan standpoint. So he might not play for the first month. Like, it would not surprise me if he ends up going on IR before this week, uh, just to give him the full time to rest and recovery, which would, suck not just for fantasy, but for him as well. But even when he comes back, like, I think they're going to be more reliant on Jordan Mason. Let him get fully healthy. What that means, though, for fantasy, if you can weather the storm, you are going to get you might have to squeak into the playoffs, but if you get Christian McCaffrey back for the playoff run, you could be a team. So make sure you're hitting those waiver wires. We talked about that on Monday on who to pick up.
I'm here
Make sure you're
twice a
being
week now,
active with
Cody.
those. I know it's confusing as all get out, but make sure you're watching those, seeing the people that were dropped. Make sure you're being active and how to weather that storm. If you weren't able to get a Jordan Mason, there's going to be people that get banged up throughout the season. You might have to spot start some guys each and every week, but make it through these first couple of weeks, even maybe up to 2 months of the season without CMC, even on a consistent basis. He might play 10 snaps, 15 snaps, something like that. But weather the storm, you'll get a star player back, and then also be willing to go out and make a trade if you're struggling, and use that seem to be like, hey, he's coming back. I need to make the playoffs to get in, kind of thing. So he's going to be a fun piece that'll affect a lot of the fantasy seasons moving forward.
And I laugh because you said like, oh, he could be limited, and then at the end of the season, he could be somebody who you try to make a move for or ends up saving your season late. We've seen it happen before with Saquon Barkley too. Some people having to panic move Saquon Barkley, and then when they trade him to a team, he ends up being a contender and winning.
On it. Yep, it wasn't George in our league of record.
It was not.
But I had that happen where I think it was 3 seasons ago now at this point. He came back and finally balled out, and that was the week 1 of the playoffs. He dropped 48 half-point PPR points, and it cost me a chance at a fantasy championship. So,
and 10 carries of CMC is still better than most running backs in the league. If it ends up coming to a point where he's going to be playing but limited, CMC is someone that's in your lineup.
I think that's a great point. And if he, maybe not that first week back, like if it's some hesitancy, like doesn't sound like he's going to play in week 2. So week 3, if they're like, we're going to see that, maybe they'll keep him on a snap count. You have to wait and see what that is. You might still hold him out for week 3. But if they show he's going to get 10, 15 carries, they'll probably use him in the red zone around the goal line as well, because that's where he excels at. So once even if he's in a split, most running backs are in a split, you're going to play CMC.
Exactly. Moving over to Pittsburgh, Russell Wilson. Did you see that he was in pads on the sideline despite being inactive and not able to play? That is the most Russell Wilson thing.
But he wasn't officially, like, he was inactive, but he was the emergency third quarterback. That's why he was in pads. Like, because it was so memeable, that's why it was going around the internet, because that is the most Russell Wilson thing. But he was technically the emergency third quarterback on the day. So, I mean, that kind of goes to show why he's limited, that he's close, but they don't want to risk further injury. So in a pinch, they might have played him. But it does sound like Justin Fields is going to start another week. And hey, he got a win. And I saw Mike Tomlin is 24-6 against rookie quarterbacks, and they got a rookie quarterback coming up this week.
All that guy does is win, at least enough to be over 500 for the season. I don't have much faith in Justin Fields starting for them and being good for their fantasy assets. That's my biggest issue when I'm looking at it this way.
Besides
I
Chris
don't
Boswell.
Except Chris Boswell. But Cody doesn't like kickers in fantasy, so
They
that
shouldn't be
doesn't
in
count.
fantasy. I stumped George again. Kickers should not be in fantasy football.
Yeah.
This is a hill I will die on.
But like when it comes to the running backs are already a mess. I don't know if I still don't feel confident playing either of them, but like George Pickens.
Yeah.
I only really have some shares of him in Dynasty where you kind of have to play him. It's a deeper league, whatever. How do you feel about him with Fields at quarterback in the next week or 2?
I'd still play him. Like, I mean, you obviously it's a loaded question without knowing the options, but as like wide receiver 2, if you want running back heavy or flex, I think he still has the upside, and we've seen him before take 10 yard. He's a playmaker. Like, he'll make the catches downfield. He'll take a 15-yard slant and turn it into a 70-yard touchdown. Like, he's still a playmaker. He's a special player. And even with Fields' limited passing ability, I would still play Pickens. I mean, and you might have to. I mean, injuries are starting to creep up quick. Like we say it a lot on this show, and I'm sure other people say it too. Don't get too cute. Like Pickens still had a okay week last. I mean, it wasn't great. They didn't score a touchdown, but they still won the game. But I would still be okay rolling out Pickens. But he's probably the only one of the Steelers players that I would feel great about because it's so much of up in the air between the Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. I mean, their defense this week against Bo Nix, like that's a fantastic play.
Yeah, that's true. But we're talking defenses. All right. I like that you're still rolling with Pickens. More wide receiver news. So the Bears, with their three-headed attack of DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, might be without two guys. Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, both in question for this weekend. Allen went down with a heel injury. I'm actually forgetting what Odunze's injury was. So there's bad
Grade
prep
1
on my
MCL
part.
sprain. I got you.
Pretty big deal on that one. Grade 1's low, but still. If
Yes.
both of these guys stay out this week, this might be a big game for DJ Moore to rebound after he didn't really do all that much in week 1.
Yeah, and Caleb definitely struggled. And, the problem with those guys is they're the Sunday night players. So you're going to have to wait and see, if you have a Keenan Allen per se. I don't think you're going to play Rumadunze. He's probably going to be out about 2 weeks, I guess. It's a 2 to 4 week injury for skill position players with a grade 1 MCO. So I think he's out of your lineup. It's the Keenan Allen question mark. If you want to play him, they're playing the Houston Texans. So that Bears defense looked okay against Will Levis, but this is CJ Stroud coming in. Like they might have to score points. So Caleb might be forced to throw the ball around. So you might want some of that passing options, but just have a guy ready to replace him if he doesn't go. He was shaken up on that deep play into the end zone near the end of the first half. And I can't remember if he came back and played in the second half. So there's the poor preparation on my part. But I think I would lean in a different direction than either of those wide receivers just because they are that Sunday night game. Unless you're like debating between like a Keenan Allen, Tank Dell, you happen to have both of those and they're both in the Sunday night game, then you can go Keenan Allen. And then if Tank Dell doesn't go or Keenan Allen doesn't go, you play Tank Dell.
I think that's a good way to put it there. I agree. I don't think there's many people that are going to be, desperate to play the Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, especially Rome Odunze. He was drafted as a late round flyer. If you have to force him into your lineup in a non-dynasty, I am concerned with how your wide receiver draft went. But maybe one of those people that you did draft that you had in front of him was T. Higgins, who has still not practiced on Thursday. Looks like he's going to be out again. Big concern for not only your fantasy teams, but the Bengals, who don't normally play well in September and played even worse than usual.
Yeah, they didn't play, but they're going to Burrowhead this week. So I think they're going to bounce back. I'm not saying they're going to get the victory. That one's going to be one of the better games of the Sunday slate for sure, in my opinion. And if you watch, I don't know how much you watch Bengals Patriots because it sounded like a snooze fest and they didn't score a lot of points. So they weren't on red zone a ton. But I did
More
have
than you
them.
thought because they were on my screen with a lot of people getting knocked out in Survivor picking Cincinnati.
I watched them a good bit as well, but they had a lot of uncharacteristic errors. Like Mike Gesicki dropped a touchdown. They had some turnovers in the red zone. Like the Bengals clearly were the better team and they should have won that game on Sunday. They just continuously shot themselves in the foot. I think they might have overlooked the Patriots. Like, I don't know if you can have a trap game in week 1 because of how crazy week 1 has gotten as of late. But when you got the Chiefs coming in week 2 and you're going there, like, and you see the New England Patriots, there could have been some overlooked, and they still need to pay Jamar Chase just to get that cloud, that distraction off of, like, let them talk about football. Let's not have this. Is he going to practice? Is he not going to practice? How much can we put him in the game plan? Because we don't know if he's actually going to play. He played, so at least it should be better preparation this week. But as soon as they can get that deal done, I think they'll be off and rolling as well.
Get Chase off the contract, get Higgins healthy and back on the field. And yeah, I do think they'd be better. I don't have them as much of a chance against the Chiefs this week, but I want to talk a little bit about Zach Moss because I know that there was a lot of worries between, how many snaps is he going to get and that kind of thing. He had a very good week 1 despite the team not, scoring 13 half PPR points. In a bad matchup where you expect them to have a chance to be behind, are you still considering him as a flex option this week or are you trying to go elsewhere?
I'm going elsewhere.
Mostly game script?
Yeah, I mean, I Like if you had like Zach Moss in the boat of like if you drafted CMC and you didn't get Jordan Mason, you might have to play him, but he shouldn't be in consideration, in my opinion. He was drafted low enough that you should have other places.
Alrighty. And then tight ends, I know Cody's second favorite position to talk about besides maybe kickers. David Njoku is officially out this week. I know I have some stock in him in some leagues, and a lot of leagues that we're in, I guess people are very up on it. Isaiah Likely was taken before this week even happened. So that wasn't an option. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that went out for him on the waiver wire and could not make that waiver move happen. If you're looking for tight ends in the bucket this week, anyone that you're going to consider, some of the top other free agents out there, we had the 2 Saints tight ends. We had Colby Parkinson. Any guys you like out of the bucket this week?
There's not a ton that I like, and I think that also plays into the fact that of the top 12 average draft tight ends, none of them had good weeks. Kyle Pitts was the number 1 tight end of the top 12 ADP tight ends. Obviously, Isaiah Likely didn't make that. He was the number 1 tight end on the week. But I wouldn't be surprised if he has a slower week and it's more of a Mark Andrews week this week when they take on the Raiders. But speaking of those Raiders, the one guy that did catch my attention was Brock Bowers. He started to, develop that rapport. You've seen the athleticism. He's basically a big wide receiver. So he's a guy, if you think the Baltimore Ravens are going to be up, they're going to pass the ball around. He's a guy I'd consider in the bucket. But, I mean, there's so many matchups there. Like, there's not – you're playing the guys that you drafted early, and then the streaming options aren't great this week really at all. Like, maybe Dalton Schultz against the Chicago Bears, but even that, like, they have good linebackers and good safeties, so it's hard to play that one. Maybe Colby Parkinson just because that's another potential target. But yeah, I think there's not a lot of great options at tight end all around.
There's really not, but like I was just curious where you're at because some of the options that I had were really, really bad. Like I had Foster Moreau, Colby Parkinson.
I'd play Juwan Johnson if I was going to play
Juwan Johnson. Okay. It's just since there's no tight ends, and like I think we said it on Monday, 4 or 5 tight ends total scored 10 or more points. Most of them were owned. The ones that weren't, like Chigon Conquo was another one. He had 2 catches for 15 yards and a touchdown. Like that was good enough to get you to like tight end 8 on the week. And it was essentially just because of the touchdown. I mean, if that's the case, then we're going to play Hunter Henry because he gets 3 touchdowns in one game randomly. I don't know.
Hey, Taysom Hill.
Taysom Hill is the answer. Always. The answer. That should be about the bulk of the injuries. I'm sure there's more we're going to talk about as we go through if anything pops up. One of the, I think, he was near the top of the waiver wire ads this week. I'm talking about J.K. Dobbins because I saw a stat pop up on X this week that absolutely blew my mind, yet maybe not. The sample size on him is a little bit smaller than some of the other running backs he's put up against, but in 3 major advanced running back stats, thanks to the advanced stats from the NFL since 2020. So it's a minimum of 200 carries in that time, which qualifies you to be in these stats. J.K. Dobbins is the leader in yards per carry, rush yards over expected per carry, and expected points added per carry, as well as second in yards after contact per carry. It just shows how much talent he has if he can stay healthy. So because of hearing that and seeing that he's now the hot hand on a run-heavy team, how real do you think J.K. Dobbins is? I mean, obviously hoping he stays on the field.
Yeah, I mean, if he stays healthy, and we talked about this, we know that John Harbaugh wants to run the ball and he's going to ride the hot hand. But I even mentioned it on Monday that he did not have, I don't remember the stats. I could look it up real quick, but he was either still behind or right. They were split even right down the middle with number of carries with Gus Edwards. He just had he was more efficient. And he had the touchdowns. Like that's my concern too. Not only is it the health, but how much do they continue to do a split backfield? And what is the week, what if Gus Edwards goes off this week when the Chargers take on the Carolina Panthers? Heck, they might both have 20-point weeks against the Panthers this week. But if he stays healthy, that's what we were hoping for. And that's why he got drafted so late was like, it was like, but can he stay healthy? And he looked the best. He looked the most explosive coming off of a torn Achilles of the three big names that were coming back. So shout out to him for the recovery. I think you can play him this week for sure, but I still, not only health is a concern, it's the split work with Gus Edwards that has me concerned about him rest of season 2.
Definitely. I think he's actually a good option to fill in for some of those guys that have bad matchups this week, like Zach Moss and such. But yeah, no, I think he's somebody who I really like, but I don't want to rely on because I'm worried about him staying on the field. And I know we can't talk about injuries too much, being, you don't know what's going to happen. But with him being hurt multiple times, that's why I think I'm putting more of that on him than I would a normal player.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And you're playing with fire when you play J.K. Dobbins. So that's really the way to look at it. He's valuable when he's out there.
All right. We have the rest of the Sunday slate and Monday slate, I should say, to look at here, Cody. What other matchups in the rest of the week do you like?
That's a great question. And I was looking at the slate and I almost sent it in our group chat, talking about it, how week 1, I thought there was great matchups at every time window. And now it was like, which ones would be the best ones? So real quick, just if anyone's out there listening, I'll read through them real quick for you. You got the 1 o'clock window. You got the Raiders at the Ravens, followed by the Chargers at the Panthers, and the Panthers, they look bad. So play all your Chargers. Saints at Cowboys, which might be the best game at 1 o'clock. Buccaneers at Lions, another rematch of the playoffs. It's like the Lions are just reliving their playoff run last year to start the season. So that one could be a fun one. Colts at Packers with probably no Jordan Love. Browns at Jaguars, that one's ugly. 49ers at Vikings, is Sam Darnold legit? That should be something to pay attention to. Then the Seahawks at the Patriots, 1 o'clock team coming all the way east or from the West Coast. That's something to pay attention. Could the Patriots start out 2-0? That's gonna be something I'll be watching. Jets at Titans. I think the Jets bounce back in that one. Commanders are hosting the Giants, and that is the 1 o'clock slate. I'll stop there because I've been just rumbling off team names. Any from that one that you really want to discuss or talk about?
From the 1 o'clock window, I think that Lions Buccaneers game is probably my favorite from the 1 o'clock window. The Baker Mayfield revenge tour continues, and I'm interested to see how legit that team is, because like we've been saying the last how many years, that team is very talented around the quarterback. So you can kind of hide a little bit of a mid-tier quarterback, I will call Baker Mayfield, being maybe 10 to 15th best quarterback in the NFL at this point. And I talked last week about, looking for that top 10. But
fun fact, Baker Mayfield, since week 14 last year, leads the league in passer rating.
That's absolutely crazy. I did not know that. And they still have a solid defense. Their running game is not the greatest, but Rachaad White being able to catch balls out of the backfield has been huge for them. So going against the Lions is a very big test for them, and to see if they have gained anything on them since last year in the postseason. That was a very good game in the postseason as well. So I'm interested to see how that one goes for sure.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, so the Colts at Packers game is most interesting to me, especially with the rumblings that Jordan Love might actually play this week. He
That's
still hasn't
absolutely
practiced.
Insane too.
It's actually not that crazy. There's definitely, because he only has a grade 1 MCL, there's been some quarterbacks that have come back with only missing 1 game or no games just because they're limited mobility in the pocket. I still think he misses this week, so we'll get to see Malik Willis versus the Indianapolis Colts, which definitely concerns me about playing any Packers players not named Josh Jacobs, because he's not directly related to Malik Willis. But I will say, if you had to pick a team that Malik Willis would probably fare best against, it would probably be one of the NFC or AFC South teams, because he's been there for 2 years. He's been in at least 4 planning meetings on how to beat that defense, especially the Colts. That's Gus Bradley was there last year. Like, he has some insight. He's prepped them. He's run scout team as Anthony Richardson. So, like, obviously you want Jordan Love out there. I don't think he's going to be there, but I think if you kind of get a good matchup with Malik Willis having to be the thing for the Packers. And if you are going to play one, I think it's Jaden Reed, just because he's so dynamic. You saw him take the end around He can. He's the Deebo Samuel of the Packers offense. Just does a little bit of everything. Doesn't line up in the backfield as much, but does a little bit of everything. So he would be the guy I would play out him and Josh Jacobs. The rest of the wide receivers, I think I'm forced to play Christian Watson somewhere, but I'm not going to play Romeo Doubs, Watson, Wicks, Bill Melton anywhere else.
I don't think I realized too when we talked on Monday that Jaden Reed actually ended up being wide receiver 1 in half PPR in week 1, leading the league
in receiving yards.
Leads the league in receiving yards, had a touchdown. Like he's somebody who I was like worried about not putting in my lineup. I might do it regardless. So I'm glad you brought that up as well. Another game I'm interested in. I know the Saints had a horrible opponent last week, beating up on the Giants, but Saints Cowboys this week could be pretty interesting.
Definitely could be interesting. Like, honestly, the most two surprising teams of how well they played. Obviously the Browns struggled, but the Cowboys, their offense looked good, their defense looked good. I mean, the Saints putting up a 40 burger. I think that's going to be a fun one at 1:00 as well. So the more we're talking about these games, why I love doing this podcast is like, all right, I'm starting to get more excited. I see the graphic that NFL on Fox throws up on Twitter, and I'm just like, maybe I'll do something while I'm watching games or something. But now I just like glued in, sitting on the couch, being that couch GM that everybody loves. 4:00 window is a little bit light, only 3 games. Rams at Cardinals, Steelers at Broncos, and Bengals at Chiefs. And I think all eyes are on that Bengals-Chiefs matchup. Rams Cardinals might be fun too, but I'll be watching the Rams or the Chiefs Bengals.
I'll be watching Chiefs Bengals until I see if the Bengals are struggling a little bit with the injuries to Higgins. Also, we never mentioned, did you see the Joe Burrow water bottle video that everyone's, I think, kind of blowing out of proportion a little bit?
Yeah, the one that he was laughing at in a press conference.
Yes,
He's like,
exactly.
I drank water. They were worried about his wrist. Yes.
And I think like him kind of moving his wrist around, whatever. I think part of it is, just trying to like get yourself psyched back up to the fact that you're good. Like when you have a major injury like that and he couldn't even grip a football and missed half a season, like that takes a toll on you mentally. It's almost like when you're playing baseball, you get hit by a pitch. The next time you face live pitching, you're kind of like, ooh, okay, no, we're good. Like he needs to just kind of get snaps under his belt. I'm sure he's completely fine. So just if anyone was thinking about that.
Yeah. But because they struggled so much last week, Joe Burrow was a quarterback drafted pretty high. Are you still rolling him out in week 2?
Yes, because I think this one works in his game script favor. The same reason we're not playing Zach Moss, because they are going to have to put up a lot of points, probably going to be behind at some point at least. I think puts, favorable matchup on Joe Burrow. He's going to have to throw the ball around. He's still got his top target, hopefully not on a snap count this week in Jamar Chase. I think this is a good matchup for Burrow to go out there and put up 20.
Awesome. Then the Sunday night game we talked about a little bit is Bears, Texans. Texans wearing their all white unis. Caleb Williams gets his Sunday night debut. This one, like Caleb looked really rough in his first game action. I expect him to get better, but he is a Bears quarterback, so you have to take that lightly. And the Texans, they were in a hard-fought game against the division rival Colts, and I watched CJ Stroud throw 2 picks that got called back by penalties that weren't really affecting the play. I think the Texans are going to win this one pretty easily. I don't know what the exact spread of this one is, but I do have a feeling this is going to be a pretty good game, a good night watch on Sunday night.
I think so too. And we almost have a throwback to the Color Rush primetime games because the Bears wearing orange, but I think there's orange on white. And then the Texans going all white in this one. So that's going to be an interesting uniform matchup as well. But I don't think the Bears offense can get any worse than it was last week. How the Texans defense compares to the Titans defense, like you would think it should be better, but if the Titans had a strength, it'd probably be defense. Also, rookie in his first game, like you said. I have some hopes that the Bears offense is going to look better, but this game could get ugly pretty quick if it doesn't.
Yeah, and I think because of that, like, let's talk about those Texans wide receivers. What would you say is the order that you would start them? Or are you starting all 3? Here? Bro, you got to pay
Texans
attention.
Receivers.
The order that you're the most confident about starting them, or is it just all 3 doesn't matter?
I think I would try to go all three, but it's got to be Nico Collins 1. And I don't want to say surprised because Stephon Diggs is Stephon Diggs, but he was involved a lot right off the bat. Diggs has got to be 2, but I know he's also dealing with a little bit of something, so keep an eye on the injury report. And then Tank Dell 3. There's a couple of leagues where I've got Tank Dell as a borderline flex, so benching him's not completely out of the question, but it's something. I think you can play him if you need to. You don't have to get cute with it.
Yeah, I definitely think I agree with you. And Tank Dell's the one that he might be that big play splash guy. Like you want on the weeks that he scores the big touchdown, but he might not be the targets and receptions. So he's going to go to Nico Collins. So that would be a fun one. Last game to talk about, Falcons at Eagles, Monday Night Football. Jason Kelce returns to Philadelphia, this time as a broadcaster. Can there be another scoregami like there was last Monday night? Falcons, maybe one of the more disappointing teams coming out of week 1. Eagles lucked into a victory. What are your thoughts on the game as the resident Eagle fan?
It's nice that they're coming off of almost a mini bye, going from a Friday game, traveling back to the US after that, and then getting a Monday. Also, this is the 3rd straight season the Eagles have played primetime Kirk Cousins in week 2 on Monday night. Like it's I don't know how the schedule makers just keep being like, okay, we're penciling in primetime Kirk against the Eagles in week 2. But I think the Eagles should handle business here. Their defense honestly looked better than I expected it to right off the bat. I know they gave up a lot of points to Green Bay, but there were a lot of positive signs out of some of the rookies and the new linebackers and such in that defense. And the Falcons look like they had a lot of growing pains. There's going to be a little bit of correction to the mean maybe on both sides, but the Eagles offense is way too talented to get held down by this Falcons defense that has a lot of question marks as well. So maybe expect a lot of points, but I think the Eagles will handle business.
Yeah, I think you might be overlooking the Falcons defense just a little bit. Granted, they did play Justin Fields last week as well, but they have some good pieces there, especially on the back end and the safety room. So could contain those. And it's will Jalen Hurts make enough plays versus dumb throws? And will the Falcons capitalize on those dumb throws? But I agree. I think the Eagles continue to play. And Kirk Cousins, I know he tore his Achilles in week 8 last year. And I think we kind of overlooked that because, he was compared so much to Rodgers, who tore it in week 1. And he really didn't look like he could play under Snyder. He was in shotgun, could be some, just getting used to being back on the football field kind of thing, get that working out there. But speaking of Kirk Cousins, we do have a fan question about the Atlanta Falcons over on YouTube. So make sure if you are, join us live, you can ask questions right here. But Snags 412, I almost got the numbers wrong. He said he traded DK Metcalf for Drake London. What are your thoughts on that deal in fantasy football? Obviously, it didn't happen.
I know you and I have very, similar thoughts on DK Metcalf. Where obviously he's a solid wide receiver, but the inconsistency is there a little bit. He's kind of up and down. So I think being able to go out there and get somebody who we think has a big ceiling in Drake London is good. And this actually does tie back into the Kirk Cousins thing a little bit too. Not only is he getting used to a new offense, like you said, he tore his Achilles in week 8. And after we also saw Rodgers make a lot of great plays, but at the same time struggle, it's not an injury you just get over right away. So him having 8 weeks, even less than Rodgers to recover, he's going to get better as the season goes on. I think that you're going to end up winning that trade in the long term, but maybe in the short term, it's not going to look too pretty.
I think that is a good way to look at it. DK looked pretty good, but I think Tyler Lockett was the better wide receiver on the
Shockingly
day.
enough, because we're it's going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba with DK this year.
Yeah, so definitely there's more mouths to feed. I mean, there's 3 versus 2 per se. If you want to count the running backs, that's where it gets a little bit interesting. I don't think we talked about the Ken Walker injury at the top of the show, but we're talking about Drake London at the minute. We can circle back to that. But I was just trying to look here quick at his how many targets each one of these players saw in week 1. And again, it's week 1. Something just fell. That's always fun. But Drake London in week 1 only had 3 targets. which is definitely scary, but I think he will bounce back. I think we talked about on Monday too that there was a trade that a fan reached out about, moving Xavier Worthy for a guy like Drake London, and we like that too. I think it's more of a 50-50 trade. Like some weeks it'll pay off, some weeks it won't. But at the end of the day, like it's not a huge needle mover for me in either direction.
And the Falcons, on top of the Cousins getting back up to speed and everything else, the Steelers' defense is top 5 in the league. So them putting up 10 points against the Steelers isn't necessarily a hit the panic button moment. They already have a little bit of an easier matchup this week with the Eagles having a lot of new pieces and stuff, and they're going to have some easier matchups in that division. The Saints are probably your best other team. The Buccaneers are they're solid. The Panthers are a cakewalk. Like, you're going to have times where they should really have get-right games.
For sure. And just to circle back to, since we didn't talk about it, Ken Walker is dealing with a little bit of injury. His status is still TBD for the week. But just check. I think there was one league I was in that Zach Charbonnet was sitting on the waiver wires. So that was even after the waiver wires went through, I picked him up yesterday in one of my leagues. So just double check. And that's the same thing. Like, always be active in your leagues. Don't just look Tuesday night for your waivers. Watch who people drop. Watch who people pick up, who might be available one week that surprises you. Even because even the top players, they're only rostered in 80 to 90%. That means there's a couple leagues out there that guy might be available. So always check.
Yes, sir. And if you have any questions as we get closer to the Sunday slate about who you should pick up, if you should play guys, whatever it ends up being, hit us in our DMs. We're always available to help you out, help you get those wins, as well as right now if you have any other questions. But in the meantime, why don't we go ahead and spend Tyler's money?
Was not prepared.
Cha-ching!
Weren't prepared, but we still have one of the best bumpers we've made right there. So as you know, $5 bet from Tyler every single week. This week, he decided to make a running back yards parlay. He barely missed last week, so I have faith he can get it this week.
He's been on a heater, too,
Has been. Maybe didn't quite hit the 5-leg parlay from last week's show, but he's been on a heater otherwise. 4-leg parlay here. We have Jerome Ford for the Browns over at 40-plus yards against Jacksonville. Devin Singletary on the Giants, 50-plus yards against the Commanders. Tony Pollard of the Titans, 60-plus yards against the Jets. And Rachaad White at 40-plus yards against the Lions.
Do you recall if this is total or just rushing?
It's just rushing.
Just rushing. Interesting. Okay.
Some of them, I wanted
the Ford
to
one seems like a lock.
The Ford one seems like a lock. I think Singletary's got it because Washington is going to give him the opportunity to stay in the game.
Yeah, but the Giants suck too. Like,
yes, they do, but I think that's a close enough matchup where it's going to be an ugly game, but it's going to be close enough that you're going to see, they're not going to have to abandon the run or anything like that. I could be wrong. That's my thought.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look. That one is definitely scary to me. The Tony Pollard 60 plus versus the Jets. And I know people are probably like, yeah, the Jets just gave up a bunch of rushing yards to the 49ers. We talked about how Kyle Shanahan is running backs. He can make all of them that he's had have been successful in that. But I will say the left side of the Tennessee Titans is very dominant versus the New York Jets, who had a rough game on a short week. Potential, but I don't love that one either. And then even the Rachaad White one, he did most of his damage last week through the air. You think the Lions are going to stay competitive and, maybe they shorten the game running behind their offensive line, but can they get 40 yards? Again, they're all iffy for me outside of Jerome Ford. So watch it be the other three hit by the first half and Jerome Ford gets 38 yards or something like that.
I could see that exactly happening. That's why I was worried about criticizing it, but there's bets for a reason. These lines are set where they are for a reason. So Vegas has a good idea of making it look tempting enough, but not quite too tempting. Except for maybe Jerome Ford. I don't know why he's only at 40, but this $5 bet. Sorry, go ahead.
Read me the running backs again. So Jerome Ford,
against Jacksonville.
Okay. How many yards?
40.
Okay. Devin Singletary is next.
He's at 50 plus.
He had 37 on 10 attempts last week.
Okay.
So he'd have to do more than last week. That's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to see Jerome
They were in
Ford
a
only had,
negative game script the entire game as well. Worth noting, they lost by like 40, almost 40.
yeah, because they couldn't move the ball.
Exactly. Tony
40,
Pollard 60 plus.
44 for Jerome Ford, by the way. I didn't mention him.
Oh, okay. So he did hit that last week. Tony Pollard 60 plus.
He did have 82 last week on 16 carries.
Okay.
So
And then Rashad White, you said, did most of his damage in the air. He's at 40 plus.
yeah, he had 31 yards on 15 attempts on the ground last week, only a 2-point yard per carry versus 75 attempts or 75 receiving yards on 6 catches. And Bucky Irving had 62 yards on 9 carries. So interested to see how that split goes moving forward. But that's a good defense too that they have. So it could be more quick game overall. Overall, I think it's a fun parlay, but not 100% sure how well it's going to do.
Well, it is plus 841 odds, so it is $5 to win 4706. If you go ahead and tell Tyler and get his money, let us know. Send us a screenshot when it wins.
Yeah. And just remember, this is not financial advice. And 1-800-GAMBLER if you need it.
Good job, Cody. We have one more segment before we get out of here, and I think you actually have a bumper for this one. Goes from not ready to completely ready and cuts
I
me
was
off.
ready. Yeah, I was tired of hearing you talk, man. We'll listen to you for 40 minutes. If
Cool.
you
Now
are
go ahead,
listening
you
to the,
start then.
fine. If you're listening to the podcast feed of this, you can yell, Cody, you should have just cut this off because I already know what happens to this game. So this is your time that you can check out. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe. But if you're watching us live or you're catching this right before the game, let's talk about that Bills Dolphins game. Do you have inactives ready, or do you want me to give you a fun fact while you pull it up?
Give me a fun fact while I pull this up. I'm almost ready.
Okay, it's not really a fun fact, but it is a surprising fact. Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, when playing the Bills, 1-6, even though quarterback wins is not a stat or should not correlate, but 7 interceptions, only averaging 207 passing yards, only has 7 touchdowns in those 7 games with a passer rating of 77.4. So the Bills have had his number. With that said, are you concerned about Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle?
I feel like I can never be, because they can have a bad game, but it could be one catch for 70 and a touchdown. Like, that's just how they are.
I'm not worried about Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle, a little bit concerned. He got a little bit banged up last week. He was able to come back into the game. That's been a thing with him. Obviously, I'm probably still playing him. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm still playing Jalen Waddle, but he would be the guy I'm concerned against this Buffalo Bills team.
With that being said, you're still probably not benching him?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, you
Okay,
probably
cool.
drafted, unless you were like me and drafted, he was your 4th wide receiver, and you only have 3 flex spots, then I would probably not play him.
All right, actives, inactives. We got on the Miami side, we knew Raheem Mostert was inactive. It has been announced that Devon Achane is officially active. Looked good in pregame warmups. Maybe we have to sit here and look at the Jalen Wright train being held in the station for another week. Maybe you're going to see a big split. We have not heard much about what the workload is going to be like for Achane yet.
Yeah, but I think it is worth noting Wright is up. Obviously, Mostert was up last week, but Wright was a healthy scratch last week when they had those running backs. Mostert was up. So if he just replaces the Mostert role, he does have some value. Maybe not, start your week off with them, but you might have to. Like if you were, the CMC issue, like I thought, man, I was in our league of record, I have CMC and Devon Achane, and I thought I was going to have to play. Those are my first 2 picks. I thought I was going to have to play 2 random running backs in week 2 of fantasy football already. I thought our season was over. But if Wright's out there, I think I'd be okay playing him if you need a spot start, if you're missing a guy like CMC or you don't trust somebody like a Zach Moss or something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't force him in your lineup, but I think, it's a good point to say you can go out there and put him in there if you are dealing with an injury or you are desperate. Mostert didn't really have a great game. He also, I don't think, played a full game. We saw a little bit of Jeff Wilson last week, who is also up, but I think there's a better chance you're going to see more Jalen Wright than Jeff Wilson. Wilson kind of seems to be a guy who's always up there as the third running back. He plays a little bit of special teams. He gets some carries when they're up or they need it, but he's not somebody they get into the game regularly, like the Mostert role, I'll say, including hopefully Wright tonight. And then obviously Achane.
Yeah, and just remember, this is Thursday Night Football. You obviously know that, but there's 10 days before the rest, so they could even be more cautious on how much HM plays, and really try to rely on the rookie who looked good in the preseason. So, and if he's still out in your waiver wires, go pick him up now. Even if you don't want to play him, then you can. If he does nothing, you can cut him for a guy on Sunday. But go ahead and play your waiver system. Why it won't cost you a waiver position if you do that. Might not cost you any fab. So go out and pick him up if he is available.
Bill's side of the ball, not a lot of notable inactives. The only, I believe, starter or rotational player who is on the inactive list is Dwayne Smoot, the defensive end. So Bill's fairly healthy coming into week 2 here. And most of their inactives are backups on the defense. So their offense is definitely good to go.
I'm pretty sure Taron Johnson's a starter, which could play well into the Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. But that's the only other inactive that might be worth mentioning for fantasy.
Thank you for catching that. That was my bad. Bill spread the ball around everywhere last week. Obviously, in the exact same situation this week.
I already know your
The answer is just Josh Allen.
And James Cook.
James, one of my favorite running backs this week. And I think there's going to be a lot of touchdowns going to James Cook, at least that aren't taken by Josh Allen on the ground at this point. Like, he's catching the ball. He is obviously effective on the ground as well. And he's the most established offensive player they have.
Yeah. Like we talked about on Monday, the way Josh Allen played, if the Bills make the playoffs, he's your NFL MVP.
100% right there.
You know what? That's another fun fact I saw. I wish I would have saved that one. But it was something like it's been 22 or 24 games since the Bills have lost by more than 6 points. So that dude just keeps them in every game.
This is why they wouldn't hit the panic button last year when they were hovering around or below 500 and they were really struggling in the first half of the year and they changed offensive coordinator. Like, no one was worried because they were in every single game. And then obviously they had a strong second half to make the playoffs. I think they got worse this offseason, yet they still continue to they had to come back last week against Arizona. I think they can win or hang in at least with Miami this week. It's going to be interesting to see how their season plays out.
I definitely agree. One last thing before we go, George. I want your score prediction for the game.
I like offense, but I don't know how much. Dolphins win 31-24.
I got the Dolphins winning, and you just picked them to win by more than 6. So that would break that streak as
you put me on the spot, man.
I put you on the spot. You know the score by now. As always, thanks for checking out another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. We're live every Monday and Thursday in your podcast feeds the next morning. We'll talk to you all Monday. Good luck in week 2.